After iconic band leader Glenn Miller disappeared mysteriously during World War II, people searched for answers. Then in 2014, newly discovered documents finally uncovered the shocking truth. If the big band era had a rock star, it was Glenn Miller. Sure, he looked nerdy in his tuxedos and glasses, but he had legions of fans who worshipped him. Like some other rock stars, Miller's tragic demise came too early, and it was also full of mystery. His body has never been found. On March 1, 1904, Alton Glenn Miller was born in Iowa. Like most members of his family, he went by his middle name. In 1915, the Millers moved to Nebraska, and Glenn started milking cows for extra cash. He put his cow milking money together and bought a trombone. He used the trombone to join the local orchestra, and even added the mandolin and cornet to his skill set. He dedicated himself to music, and took it so seriously that he missed his high school graduation because he had a gig. When he went to college, this absenteeism continued. Eventually, he dropped out completely. Without a college education, Miller was putting all his eggs into one basket. After dropping out, he moved to New York City and studied math. But not traditional math. He studied the Schillinger system, which uses math concepts to compose music. At this time, Miller wrote a song, and rather unimaginatively called it Miller's Tune. This would one day change to Moonlight Serenade and become his signature song. Before that happened, Miller had a problem to deal with. Now that he was in the Big Apple, he had to compete with loads of other musicians. He was playing trombone with Ben Pollock when he was suddenly upstaged. There was a new kid in town named Jack Teagarden. Not only was he a better player than Miller, but he started getting Miller's solos. Miller didn't like being second to Teagarden, so he decided to focus on something besides the trombone. He put his efforts into arranging and composing music. His career was on the up, so he decided it was time to find a wife. And he already had a woman in mind. A girlfriend he dated back in college, Helen Berger, was waiting in the wings. She was up for getting married, but her parents were a different story. They were pretty sure that Miller's career choice wouldn't adequately provide for their daughter. Helen was an independent woman, so she turned her back on her parents, went to New York, and married her sweetheart anyway. Now, Miller had to prove his in-laws wrong. For exclusive perks like early access to new videos, priority replies to your comments, and to have your say on future content, consider becoming a FactorNet member. On top of that, your support helps keep the channel going. Click the link in the description for more details. After securing financial backing from his friend Simon Shribman, he assembled his orchestra, and by spring 1938, Miller was finally feeling like things were happening. He was garnering a reputation around the New York area, and then he got a call that would change everything. The Glen Island Casino had launched many careers, and Miller was likely thrilled to have the chance to play there. When he and his band showed up to the casino, they were absolutely stunned. 1-800 people had shown up for Miller's act. By the following year, Time magazine reported that of the dozen or so songs found in most jukeboxes in America, at least 2, and sometimes up to 6 of them, were Miller's. He was taking America by storm. In his version of Tuxedo Junction had opening week sales of $115,000, it was time for his career to go into orbit. On October 6, 1939, Miller played every musician's dream venue, Carnegie Hall. It didn't take long before Hollywood came calling. 20th Century Fox was making the musical comedy Sun Valley Serenade, and they asked Miller to provide the music, and even play a role. In the end, he did more than just make an appearance in the film. He provided a show-stopping sequence that went down in history. Even though the film takes place at a ski resort in Idaho, the director wanted to work in a song that would really let Miller shine. This was Chattanooga Choo Choo, and it had nothing to do with skiing at all, but that didn't matter. The sequence ended up being a stunning 8 minutes long, including tap dancing and wowed audiences. The song itself became the first gold record ever, selling 1.2 million copies. Glenn Miller wasn't only serious about music, he was also serious about his country. When World War II started, he was ready to sign up, but there were two problems. First off, the draft wasn't calling on married men at that time. Also, Miller wore glasses, which made it even more unlikely that he'd get the call from Uncle Sam. Miller's next plan was to use his musical background to help his country. He sent a lengthy letter to a general in the Army, explaining that he had a new and outlandish idea about military music. He wanted to add jazz to boost the soldiers' morale. His application was approved, and he had 1 month to wrap up his affairs before deployment. On September 24, 1942, Glenn Miller said goodbye to his fans on his regular radio program. He and his band gave one final live performance at Central Theater in New Jersey, and that was that. Miller bid farewell to music. He was as busy in the military as he had been as a civilian musician. He screened personnel for bands and recruited new musicians. He was also responsible for a radio production unit that would broadcast in New York City. Considering his success by the time he enlisted, Miller was used to doing things his way, and so his rebellious attitude got him into trouble. His use of jazz arrangements like blues and the night for the marching bands didn't go over well. He had to fight with the purists, and eventually he won. Miller had almost single-handedly changed military music forever. In May 1944, a cable arrived from General Dwight D. Eisenhower. He wanted Miller and his unit sent to Europe. He felt that Miller was the only one who could give the fighting men a much-needed boost to their morale. On June 19th, Miller flew to London and into the center of World War II. He and his band first set up home in a BBC radio office. This was in the middle of an area of London where the constant sound of German explosives could be heard. He arranged to move his unit to a quieter place, and his timing turned out to be impeccable. A day later, that BBC office was bombed. The explosion destroyed the entire building, and 150 people lost their lives. While in the UK, Glenn Miller worked closely with David Niven, who would go on to become an Academy Award-winning actor. Together, Miller and Niven planned to move the unit to France, where they could entertain at hospitals and for troops on leave from the battle. When the plans for the relocation went behind schedule, Niven promoted Miller to executive officer. This meant that he would go to France earlier to make the arrangements for his band. Niven initially booked Miller on a December 14th flight to Paris, which ended up being canceled due to bad weather. As a result, he was then invited by Lieutenant Colonel Norman Bassell to fly to Paris with him the following day. Bassell was taking a Nurdine UC-64A Norseman, which was a small single-engine plane. Because of Miller's travel orders, he had no authorization to get on the plane with Bassell. He did it anyway, and because of this, no one officially knew where he was. On December 15th, just before 2 p.m., the plane took off from RAF Twinwood Farm. No one ever saw Miller, Bassell, or the pilot again. The morning following Miller's flight, the Allies were caught off guard by German forces, and a major battle began, later dubbed the Battle of the Bulge. For this reason, no one seemed to notice that Miller's plane had disappeared. It took an astonishing 9 days to realize he was missing. When the Allied forces finally realized, 2 senior officers went in person to see Helen Miller at her home and break the news. Miller's wife was speechless. The couple had just adopted a son, Stephen, but it gets even more heartbreaking. They had also adopted another child, this time a girl named Johnny, and Miller hadn't even met her. As Helen grappled with what had happened, it was time to tell the world. On Christmas Eve 1944, an announcement was made to the media. Legendary band leader Glenn Miller had disappeared, and no one knew where he was. Jerry Gray stepped in to take Miller's place, and the Christmas concert went ahead. Most people at the time assumed that Glenn Miller and his plane had crashed for 2 reasons. There was fog that day, and there was the potential of ice being on the wings. Of course, there were a lot more far-fetched theories about what happened to Miller. Some believed that it was the Germans who shot down the plane, and that Miller specifically was a target. This theory suggests that Miller was part of a secret mission, and that the Germans captured him. But there's another theory that places the blame much closer to home. In 2000, Sotheby's auctioned off a logbook from World War II. The writer of the book was also in the sky the night Miller's plane disappeared. Derek Thurman said that he was on a raid of Germany that night, and the usual practice was to dump any unused explosives in the sea before returning home. He claims that he and 3 of his crew saw a small plane headed in the opposite direction, which easily could have been Miller's plane. Unfortunately, they suspected that the explosives they had intended to drop into the sea probably hit Miller's plane. The rear gunner apparently saw the disaster with his own eyes. He said that he saw Miller's plane flip over and enter the ocean. That entire area was supposed to be clear of any aircraft, so the next thing to figure out was why Miller's plane was there in the first place. A possible solution to the mystery of the route Miller's plane took came from a bizarre source. In 2012, Sylvain Anderton tried to sell his brother's old notebooks on the BBC's Antiques Roadshow. As it turned out, Anderton's brother was a plane spotter when he was a teenager. He kept meticulous records of all the planes he saw pass over him while he was working. Somewhere in these books could be the answer to Miller's disappearance. Authorities realized that the spotter's location would have given him a direct view of Miller's plane. What he learned from the notes was that the plane was on schedule and on the correct course. This threw the friendly fire theory out the window. Then another surprising find would bring us closer to the truth. Back in 1987, a fisherman had made a shocking discovery. He found a plane in his net, but had to let it slide back into the sea. Years later, he saw a photo of Miller's plane and realized it could be the same one. With his help, authorities eventually located the wreckage near Dorset, England. This fisherman may have solved the mystery of Miller's disappearance, but we still don't know for sure. The International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery has worked to determine if the wreckage is actually Miller's aircraft. Unfortunately, there's still no concrete proof, but it does remain a possibility. After Glenn Miller's bizarre disappearance, his son Stephen had to put up with conspiracies. Until he got so fed up, he decided to try to solve the mystery himself. He hired an expert on his father's life, Dennis Sprague, who had spent years looking for clues. Finally, he came upon military documents that hadn't been examined before. Because of these documents, Sprague now believes that the fuel intakes on Miller's plane froze and caused it to go down over the English Channel. Sadly, Stephen passed away in 2012 before he got to know what really happened to his father, the inimitable Glenn Miller. If you enjoyed this Factinate video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible stories. If you want to see in who we cover next, join our membership program through the link in the description for exclusive perks. Your support means everything to us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.